The New Orleans Saints get the new car smell that they wanted, but how much will it cost them? We're breaking down Derek Carr's contract, and I'll tell you why. Derek Carr could be the key to keeping Michael Thomas in New Orleans. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into a live bonus episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first, second, third, whatever it is, listen of the day, every day. Proud part of Locked On Podcast Network here. And don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode, it's a bonus second Monday episode today, so we'll get you another episode for Tuesday for sure. But because things kind of, erupted very quickly Monday morning with the New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr, I wanted to be able to bring you two more pieces of insight quickly on Derek Carr's new sort of deal here as the New Orleans Saints quarterback for the next, we'll say, 4 years on his contract at least. So we're going to discuss today how Derek Carr impacts New Orleans Saints' chances of keeping Michael Thomas, why he makes it more likely that Michael Thomas is back in New Orleans. But first, we're going to take a look at Derek Carr's contract structure, what it could look like, what it means. So we already know sort of the base details of the deal, right? 4 years, $150 million in total. $100 million is guaranteed, and then about $6 million guaranteed at signing. So these things all move pretty quickly, and we already know all of those things. But what would the structure potentially look like? And how much will the New Orleans Saints have to still build around Derek Carr? Because yes, the Saints got Derek Carr to New Orleans, the guy that they've wanted all offseason, but it's not just that one move that's going to set them up for success in 2023. They've got to be able to build around Derek Carr. How much money are they going to have in order to make that happen? So that's what we're breaking down as we get started today. I want to give a quick shout out to the folks all in the chat: Charles Scott, Greg Walker, J Rowe, Rose City, MJ, William. I see all y'all. B-Rock, Matthew, I appreciate Mr. Jerry, of course. I appreciate y'all very much for being here, and many, many more. So let's take a look at how the New Orleans Saints contract could potentially be broken out here. So what we know is that $100 million of this contract is totally guaranteed. In just those 4 years, that means you're talking about guarantees of about $25 million per year, but you have to expect that the Saints are going to put at least one void year on the contract. So that would end up taking it from being around $25 million of guaranteed money on average per year to $20 million of guaranteed money on average per year. So that's a good spot for the New Orleans Saints to be. In terms of the overall average per year, it puts Derek Carr at $37.5 million. That puts him in the neighborhood of guys like Kirk Cousins and others that are kind of in that sort of like middle tier, second tier of quarterbacks. So the Saints did not overpay when it comes to this deal. And in fact, $35.7 million for a quarterback is going to look very, very different as soon as Lamar Jackson gets his deal, as soon as Joe Burrow gets his deal, as soon as, Justin Herbert eventually gets his deal. So as the new contracts, I would even say possibly gets impacted by the way you look at it, depending on how much Daniel Jones gets in his contract this offseason, as the New York Giants and Daniel Jones are trying to get that done. So this is not a situation in which New Orleans Saints overpaid. Did they pay a lot? Yes, but what they paid for is effectively what they're getting: a top 15, top 16 quarterback. $37.5 million is not a bad place to be at all for the New Orleans Saints when it comes down to it. The thing that you're going to want to be watching next, though, because again, average per year is a nice, bright and shiny number, that's not oftentimes what players actually end up leaving with by the time that it's all said and done. That's cash, that's some money that's kind of thrown about, stuff like that in terms of averages and all those other things, but that's usually not the full payout of what the contract ends up being. Very unlikely that Derek Carr sees $150 million of his deal without either being extended again before the fourth year is up, or without the Saints moving on because things don't work out between the two of them. So either they're going to lock him down long term, meaning that he won't see the end of this contract and they'll add new money onto it and new years onto it, or he doesn't see the end of this contract and the Saints are sort of back in a situation where they're looking for a quarterback again. Now, you obviously hope for the former as opposed to the latter, but both things can be true. Both things are very possible. So what is it that a New Orleans Saints contract with Derek Carr, what would it look like? What are the things that you need to pay attention to? The thing that you would want to pay attention to here is what's the signing bonus, right? So $60 million of it is guaranteed at signing, but that doesn't mean that it's a $60 million signing bonus. That would be $12 million per year with the void year. That's a big chunk of change in terms of what that could look like. So instead, what you're looking to see is maybe if that's a $30 million signing bonus, which over the course of 5 years comes out to just $6 million per year. Your vet minimum contract for the first year is very likely what Derek Carr is going to get with as many years as he has vested as a 9-year veteran. That's about $1.065 million. So if they gave him a $30 million signing bonus, you're talking about a cap hit of just barely over $7 million in 2022. You already know that $10 million is in the third year of the contract becomes guaranteed after the first year. We already know that. So it's about $70 million in those first 3 years that ends up becoming guaranteed. But you know the accounting of all that after the first year already. So this is a very good structure for the New Orleans Saints, bringing in a quarterback on a contract that is team friendly, that is effectively cost controlled, and opens up all of these sort of opportunities in the next couple of years to restructure, convert money, push money down the road, make more salary cap space. Don't expect the New Orleans Saints to change their approach when it comes to contracts anytime soon. The Saints don't look at the salary cap as a yearly amount. They look at the salary cap as something to be managed over the course of 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. That's the way that Kai Harley treats it. So know that with Derek Carr signing his deal, you can expect a low first year cap hit, which includes very likely a veteran minimum base salary with a larger signing bonus that ends up getting him all of his money. He knows what he's guaranteed. He's now gone from being guaranteed $40.4 million over the course of the next 2 years to being guaranteed $70 million basically in the first 3, knowing that that money is guaranteed by the end of the first one, and up to $100 million that could be guaranteed beyond that. So there's a lot of really good stuff here for Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. This is a very friendly contract, which allows them to be able to go into free agency and continue to build around. Because again, the success for the New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr isn't limited to the fact that they signed Derek Carr. It extends beyond that. What do they do for the rest of this offseason? One of the biggest names you're going to want to follow over the course of this offseason, especially now that Derek Carr is the New Orleans Saints quarterback, is wide receiver Michael Thomas. And with the Saints signing Derek Carr, there's a much better chance that Michael Thomas remains a New Orleans Saint in 2023. I'll tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, our live episode here, brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market, bar none, pun intended. Bar 1, bar 50, doesn't matter. They all taste incredible, and they have some amazing flavors that you're going to want to check out as well, including some unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, mint brownie, coconut almond. They have maple donut. They've got frosted animal cracker. There's so many different things for you to check out over at built.com. And don't worry, it's not limited to there. If you've got a Walmart or a Sam's Club near you, you can get what you're looking for there as well. You can head over to the pharmacy at any Walmart, get a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs, or you can get some of their hit flavors, 13-bar box over at Sam's Club, like brownie batter and churro. Don't worry, you can thank me later. Head over to built.com to try the best tasting protein bar on the market today. All right, family, we are wrapping up this quick bonus episode of Locked On Saints, giving you all the details around what we know about Derek Carr's contract so far, what the rest of the structure could look like, but also how he ends up having an impact on being able to build, court, and bring in free agents, none of which potentially more important and could even be the first domino to fall post Derek Carr would be wide receiver Michael Thomas, who has already retweeted the NFL national account that tweeted out a photo of Derek Carr being signed by the New Orleans Saints, who, praised the heavens that Derek Carr was signed. So there's clearly something happening here to where Michael Thomas is very happy about Derek Carr's being signed, an arrival in New Orleans. But what does that mean for the New Orleans Saints? I saw a question in the chat here a moment ago asking, is Michael Thomas healthy? I don't know. I don't have that information right off the top, but what I can tell you is this. From everyone that I talked to at the Combine in Indianapolis, they feel very good about where his recovery is going. So I wouldn't say that he's healthy now, but he is getting there. And that the Saints and Michael Thomas have maintained almost daily communication, or at least pretty often communication, over the course of this offseason. Derek Carr ends up changing the game for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to keeping Michael Thomas, because Michael Thomas views Derek Carr as a quarterback that can get him the ball, views Derek Carr as a quarterback that can allow him to be able to be his elite self. Now, Michael Thomas has to stay healthy, and Michael Thomas has to be able to finish out a season. So that's why what the New Orleans Saints can do, now that they have Derek Carr, is approach Michael Thomas and say, we want to keep you here in New Orleans. But in order to make that happen, because you've been paid a lot of money over the course of the last 3 years where you've only appeared for about 10 games, in order for us to make that happen, we have to rework your deal. Right now, the Saints have some not so good leverage when it comes to the current contract that Michael Thomas is a part of. It's one of the reasons why many of us believe that Michael Thomas was very likely to be on the way out this offseason. He's got a $30 million guarantee that kicks in for 2024. If he's on the roster here on March 17th of 2023, that's unreasonable. And he also has an incentive in his contract where if he appears on the field for 4 games in 2023, then he's guaranteed another $30 million in 2024. That's more than $60 million that could go his way in 2024 for being on the roster and appearing in 4 games in 2023. The Saints can't have him back on the roster under that contract. So now that they have Derek Carr, who Michael Thomas believes in, they can go to Michael Thomas and say, we want to rework your deal. We want you to stay here in New Orleans. You want to stay here in New Orleans. We got you a quarterback that's going to get the ball. They're in a weak NFC South division where there are no other real quarterbacks at this moment in the division. The Saints are in the best position right now in their division. They look like they can be a playoff team if they get the rest of this offseason right. And you look at what Michael Thomas has already said in terms of his excitement about Derek Carr. So now the Saints can go to him and say all of that and say, but we want to rework your deal. So what would they do to rework his deal? Bring him, rework that deal, maybe even all the way down to a 1-year deal or, just like a short-term deal, and effectively make it incentive heavy. And they can do that by building up performance-based incentives to where a certain number of catches, certain number of yards, certain number of completion percentage, whatever, and that each sort of rung that he hits, he adds more and more money onto the contract, because then he ends up being able to make his money based on his performance. And they could also add availability, percentage of snaps played, games appeared in, all of those pieces they would also be able to add. So what they could do with Michael Thomas is effectively bring him in, bring him back, and say, earn your money in 2023. And with Michael Thomas and the trust that he has in Derek Carr and how excited he is that Derek Carr is all of a sudden in New Orleans, clearly he believes that he could do that. So now the Saints are uniquely positioned to be able to go to Michael Thomas and say, we did this, you want to be a part of this, here's how we make that happen. And they could approach that with a reworked deal. That's a huge deal for the New Orleans Saints, because keep this in mind. Derek Carr has never had a top 20 defense throughout his career. He has, or a defense that finished better than 20 throughout his entire career. So he's now with the top 5 defense with the New Orleans Saints, right? He was tied for the 4th highest average depth of target last year in a bad offensive system in Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders. Now he comes to New Orleans. He's got weapons like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, potentially Michael Thomas, Juwan Johnson, who's a restricted free agent, so very likely he stays as well. This was an offense, the New Orleans Saints, that took Andy Dalton and made him the 14th highest quarterback when it comes to average depth of target at 35 plus years old at this point. So now you think about the weapons that the Saints have, you think about the defense that they have, you think about the division that they're in. There's a real easy sale to be made here. And now that they have that quarterback, to be able to continue to build around what they can bring in over the course of this offseason. So while Michael Thomas might be the first domino to fall, he can't be the last. There are a couple of other things they're going to have to do over the course of this offseason. They have to figure out running back. Bijan Robinson at 29, Jahmyr Gibbs at 40, Tajay Spears at 40 or 71 in the draft. There's a lot of different ways that the Saints can approach running back. They can also go to the free agent market to add to that room as well. Guys like Alexander Madison, guys like Dearness Johnson, if you want somebody that's cost effective because he hasn't gotten many opportunities. You can go with a Rashad Penny, but then draft so that you're covered in terms of any injury risk, things like that. That's a big piece for them to fill out, because you're very likely going to miss Alvin Kamara for 6 or more games in 2023 as his ongoing legal situation continues. He is now set for trial on July 31st during Saints training camp, so not great timing, but that means that they could potentially start the season without their top running back. It's a big need for them this offseason. So as the Saints continue this offseason, they'll need to rebuild their defensive interior. They'll need to shore up depth when it comes to linebacker as well as safety. They'll need to shore up their depth on the offensive line. You're looking at them to potentially add wide receiver talent, tight end talent, and running back talent. But now that they have Derek Carr in the building here on March 6th, right, signed, sealed, delivered, at this point, they know exactly what their contract structure is. They know exactly what their salary cap situation is, how to plan around that. And Derek Carr now has a full week before anybody starts negotiating with NFL teams to start courting free agents, because teams might not be able to talk to players, but players can talk to players all they want. And so now all of a sudden, Derek Carr is going to have a meeting with Michael Thomas. I would bet he will probably reach out to a guy like Mac Hollins, who's entering free agency, that he knows, that he trusts, that he likes. So look for the Saints to potentially look for some of those guys that are already connected to Derek Carr, work to keep Michael Thomas, and then draft aggressively when the NFL draft rolls around. So the Saints are, Rose City, is Blake Gilligan going to sell his number to Derek Carr? Punter Blake Gilligan, of course, is number 4. Everybody's sharing a bunch of photos of Derek Carr in the number 4 jersey, but in a number 4 New Orleans Saints jersey. And Blake Gilligan tweets out like the Popeyes kid, gif of him just like giving the side eye and everything. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know if Derek is going to buy that number from Blake or how they're all going to work it out, but it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. The Saints have now a lot of different ways that they can go. Just because they signed Derek Carr, though, who is a top 16 quarterback, but he's probably toward the bottom half of that top 16, they still have a lot of work to do over the course of this offseason. This does not guarantee them success, but if Derek Carr helps you keep Michael Thomas, if Michael Thomas stays healthy, if Derek Carr courts some good free agents over to you, if having a quarterback now opens up the vision of what the New Orleans Saints offense can be 2023, 2024, 2025, they end up being in a position here in a bad division to be able to do something that will allow them to rebound off of these sort of disappointments of the last 2 years. So I wouldn't start writing off the Saints as a 10-win team yet. I wouldn't start writing them off as a double-digit win team yet, but they're getting close, and they've taken the first step here on March 6th, well before the free agency period opens up. Richard Kennedy just said, "This is the most excited I have seen you this year, Ross." I wonder why. I wonder why. This is going to be a lot of fun here on the Locked On Saints podcast as we go through how does Derek Carr change the offense? How does the offense change around him? Who are the players that would be good fits around him? We'll answer some of those questions. We'll take a look at running backs, how to complement and build. This gives the New Orleans Saints such a clear direction of where the New Orleans Saints are headed next. So I'm very excited to share that with you here every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here with us. Make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL Draft as well. Damian Parson, Keith Sanchez. I know they're going to be talking some Saints. Keith Sanchez is a Saints fan, so make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL Draft so that you can hear a little bit more about how Derek Carr impacts the draft plan for the New Orleans Saints. Get some new mock drafts, all of that every single Monday through Friday over at Locked On NFL Draft. I appreciate you, as always, y'all, for being, I thank you for allowing me to be a part of your day, being a part of your routine. As always, thank you for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. And of course, if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.